What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, the Raiders will pick first in the NFL draft. The tank is complete. Plus, the Golden Knights have lost 5 straight. Is somebody going to get fired soon? UNLV football might have their next quarterback, a transfer from an SEC program, and the Runnin Rebels have won 3 games in a row. We've got a lot to get to on the show today. That's what happens when I don't do a show for 4 or 5 days. Big weekend in Las Vegas sports, not all of it great. We are going to start with the Raiders. Here we go. The Raiders got the number 1 pick in the draft despite winning on Sunday because the New York Giants beat the Cowboys, which means the Raiders were going to pick first overall no matter what happened in their game against the Chiefs. And Pete Carroll did it. Honestly, I am shocked. I thought this team was going to be too good this year. That was my main criticism of the offseason, that the Raiders, by getting Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, were going to be too competent to get a high draft pick while being too incompetent to get into the playoffs, that they were going to be in the worst position possible, and that's a 6 or 7 win team that picks around 10 in the NFL draft. But God, they sucked. They were worse than last year with Antonio Pierce. Geno Smith was horrendous. And they got the number 1 pick in the draft. They weren't trying to do it until these last few weeks of the season, but they actually accomplished it. And if we went back to the start of last offseason when they fired Antonio Pierce, if you told me then the Raiders are going to get the number 1 pick in the draft, I would have said fantastic work by everybody involved. That's exactly what they should have been trying to do. The unfortunate part, they weren't trying to do it, but they did it. They actually got the first pick in the draft, and I am surprised they were able to pull it off because I thought they were doomed to a 7-win season where they didn't get in the playoffs and they didn't get a good draft pick. I do want to make one quick note here. The Raiders did hurt their draft status yesterday. Not the first round, but had they lost to the Chiefs, they would have had a 2-15 record and been the only team in the league with a 2-15 record. But instead, by winning, they finished with a 3-14 record, and they were one of 4 teams that had a 3-14 record. They just happened to win the tiebreaker that gets them the number 1 pick. But Dane Brugler pointed out on Twitter, if you have the same record, you don't win the tiebreaker for every single round. They mix up the order in which you pick in subsequent rounds. So the Raiders will pick first overall in the first round, but in the second round, they're going to have the 4th pick of the second round. And then it gets mixed throughout the rest of the draft. So they'll be picking 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in some of these rounds. Whereas had they lost, they'd been picking first in every single round. Doesn't matter nearly as much as having the number 1 pick, but they're going to pick, 36th, 7th in the second round instead of 33rd in the second round. So it does hurt a little bit. Brutal. Winning a game that hurts your draft status. But they lose the Chiefs. Oh, by the way, incredible football game. Incredible football game. You get 4 field goals from each team and a safety for the Raiders. No touchdowns scored in the game. And getting a safety is what determines who wins that game. The Raiders won the game while averaging 3.3 yards per play. Kansas City was at 2.8. Unbelievably bad football game. Horrific football game. And the Raiders won it. Kenny Pickett started the game at quarterback, but he was 1 for 4, threw an interception, had 3 yards, and Aiden O'Connell played the rest of the game. Was not good, but was better than Kenny Pickett. That's about the extent of that performance from the quarterbacks for the Raiders. All of it was bad the entire season. Yes, the offensive line was bad, but from Geno Smith to Kenny Pickett to the little bit of Aiden O'Connell we saw, their quarterback play was horrendous this year. Now, the big question, and hopefully by the time you're listening to this, it hasn't already been decided, but Pete Carroll, is he coming back as the Raiders head coach next season? There were a couple of reports over the weekend before the game against the Chiefs that the Raiders are going to fire Pete Carroll, that he's going to be a one-and-done coach. Now the season's over. They go 3-14. They get the number 1 pick. I think you have to fire Pete Carroll. Like, I think this should be an easy decision for Mark Davis if he wants to win anything in the future. Important note, if he's more worried about his money, then you might not fire Pete Carroll. And that's fine, because I would not want to keep paying coaches to not coach my team, right? Like, it started here in Vegas with John Gruden, and then Josh McDaniels, and then Antonio Pierce, and now if they fire Pete Carroll after 1 year, Pete Carroll, where you're just paying these guys to go away. You're paying these guys with multiple years left on their contracts. I can understand if you don't want to keep doing that, and that's fine if that's Mark Davis's priority. It's not great for the organization, right? This is the same complaint that a lot of people in baseball have about cheap owners that don't spend money on players. We're just in a different sport and applying it to coaches. But the best path to contending is 2 steps right now: drafting a quarterback at number 1 overall and hiring an offensive-minded coach, right? I don't know who the best choice is. I don't know who the right answer is, but, like, you look at Seattle with Clint Kubiak as their offensive coordinator, right? Maybe that's one where you're like, wow, look what he did with Sam Darnold, right? You look at Buffalo with Joe Brady and what they've been with Josh Allen. Again, I don't know if either one of those are actually the right answer, but you want that offensive-minded head coach because you want Sean McVay. You want Kyle Shanahan, right? Matt LaFleur even. Ben Johnson has done it for 1 season in Chicago. That's the type of coach you want, the one that takes quarterbacks and makes them better. You want the coach that when Jordan Love gets hurt and it's Malik Willis, can still put together a competent offense and score points. That's what you're looking for in your head coach. I don't think I would ever be interested in hiring a defensive-minded head coach. I don't think I would want to do that. I don't think that's the best way to have success. Yes, it's going to happen. There are going to be teams with defensive-minded head coaches that win games. It's obviously going to happen, but I don't think that's the best way to do it. You want the offensive-minded head coach. And yes, there are going to be offensive-minded head coaches that flame out. There's going to be number 1 picks that flame out. The Raiders have only had 1 number 1 pick in their history. It was Jamarcus Russell. It's one of the worst flameouts ever, right? Obviously, that's going to happen. It's not any sort of guarantee, but I think it's much more likely that if the Raiders are ever going to like win a Super Bowl with the next person they hire and the next player they draft, it's going to be because they drafted a quarterback at number 1, and it's going to be because they hired an offensive-minded head coach, right? And on the max ceiling, right? You nail the coaching hire and you nail the draft and you are good for a decade and maybe longer, right? That's the absolute ceiling. There's a lower than ceiling outcome where you might not ever win the Super Bowl, but you have a really good quarterback and you have a good coach and you are consistently in the playoffs, winning the division, right? Like you're a contender every year. It's very hard to win the Super Bowl, but you can be a good team with those things in place, right? And again, things go poorly with one or both and everybody sucks and it's bad. You could also have the Mike McDaniel outcome where it looks like he and Tua are going to be the next big thing, the next great offense. And then it stops working and it all falls apart and you just get this brief glimpse of success. There's a lot of different ways, outcomes, but I think the best way to do it is with the offensive-minded head coach who makes the quarterbacks look awesome while also drafting a quarterback in the first round that you hope is awesome on their own, and you put them together and you're awesome. That, I think, is the best way to do it. That, I think, gives you the best path to success. So if it were me, I'm firing Pete Carroll. And I am out there scouring whatever offensive coordinator. It could be a quarterback's coach. It doesn't even have to be. You can take a chance on somebody if you are convinced they can be this next great play caller in the NFL. That's what I would be trying to pair with whatever quarterback I take at number 1 overall, probably Fernando Mendoza. I'd be trying to find the Clint Kubiak to bring in and pair him up and say, you two, you got like at least 3 years. I don't know what timeline you want to put on it, but you got 3 years. Let's see what you got. You can be 2-15 next year, right? We're not going to fire you after 1 year if you're 2-15 because we know this is a big rebuild, but we're going to give you about 3 years, right? And if we see real success in that 3rd year, we might have something special. But that's what I would do. I would fire Pete Carroll and I'd be looking for the offensive-minded head coach. A couple other things from the Raiders. One, Tonka Hemingway had 2 sacks in this game. Who the hell's Tonka Hemingway? It's a good question. The Raiders drafted Tonka Hemingway in the 4th round, defensive tackle out of South Carolina. And they proceeded to play him 25 total snaps through the first 8 weeks of the season. 25 total snaps through 8 weeks for their 4th round pick. He, in the second half of the year, in 5 games, played at least 20 snaps. In those 5 games, he had 4 total sacks, 2 of them yesterday. This is part of what made this season so infuriating. It wasn't that the Raiders were losing, because if you listened to the show last week, you know I love tanking, and I am on board for tanking. It's that the Raiders were miserable, and they weren't playing their young players. And we've talked about this, right? 2nd round pick Jack Bech, the wide receiver, just doesn't get to play. At one point, Tyler Lockett was getting snaps over him. Why the hell were they doing that, right? They took 2 offensive linemen in the 3rd round. It took until this team was, 2-11 before they gave them starts. Tonka Hemingway, a defensive tackle taken in the 4th round, they can't get him on the field for more than 20 snaps in a game. 25 snaps total through 8 weeks. That is insane that you could be that bad on the season where you get the number 1 pick and there's a refusal to play rookies because Pete Carroll was so stubborn about, the veterans give us the best chance to win. Wild that would happen, because here's the thing. Is Tonka Hemingway any good? Does anybody know if Tonka Hemingway is any good? Because the Raiders need, 18 new starters to be a legitimate contender. It's going to take a while to build this up. And ideally, you would have drafted some guys in this most recent draft that are going to fill in these holes on the roster. But the only one that we got to see play extensively was Ashton Jeanty, the least important position on the field. Otherwise, are these other players good? And maybe they're not. Maybe they're all just terrible and it was truly a horrific draft and they didn't play because they were terrible. But we didn't get to see them in games. And that makes it much harder to evaluate, especially if there's a brand new coaching staff coming in. How good is Tonka Hemingway? We don't know. I have no idea because he didn't get to play this season. Also, Daniel Carlson made all 4 of his field goals against the Chiefs, including the game winner from 60 yards. Talked about this earlier in the season. I think it might have been on the radio show. It might have been on the press box, not actually on Technically Correct. But Daniel Carlson is a free agent after this season, and I think legitimately in the second half of the year, he was kicking for his job. But he ended the year really, really well. He made 10 of his last 11 kicks. Obviously, yesterday was a great day for him. He ends up 22 of 25 on the year, which is actually very good. That's a good number for Daniel Carlson, given that he was pretty bad earlier in the year when you combine missed field goals and missed extra points. I think it was the Denver game that was the real tipping point there, where he missed the potential game time field goal late in that game. But he's a free agent, and he's not been this sort of top of the league kicker that it looked like he was for a couple of seasons earlier in his career. He had a cap hit of over $5 million this season, which is not a lot in the NFL, but it's quite a bit for a kicker. I don't know what you do here because we are seeing kickers drill. Cam Little hit a 67-yarder on Sunday for the Jags. So it does feel like you might be able to do better than Daniel Carlson, but also not everybody has the Cam Little or the Brandon Aubrey or whoever else it is. So maybe he is coming back. Maybe he did sort of win his job back because he finished the year pretty strong. But I thought that was an actual interesting point of the game yesterday, where the guy who's kicking for his job actually was their best player, the most important player anyways. He put points on the defense, did put points. He wasn't the only one, but the defense puts points up. But he put up 12 of their 14 points. Maybe he did kick his way back into being the Raiders kicker next season, but it wouldn't surprise me, especially if there's a new coaching staff, if they go somewhere else. So Raiders win. They still have the number 1 pick. It did hurt their picks in later rounds. Not as big of a deal, but hurts a little bit. So they got the number 1 pick. Terrific job by this organization to finally do something that I've been asking them to do for years. They finally did it. We'll see what changes come. We'll see if Pete Carroll's the head coach later this week. I'd imagine they'd make that decision fairly soon. I guess with the playoffs starting, they could make it a little bit later, but normally you do that relatively quickly. Coming up next here on Technically Correct, it is Bischoff's Briefs. All right, so first off, in Bischoff's Briefs, We're going to do Golden Knights here next. After Bischoff's Priest, we're going to do UNLV. We got UNLV basketball. We got UNLV football. Big weekend. Lots of stuff happening. We're going to get to all of it. Almost all of it. We'll see. But a lot happening. So, Golden Knights. They lose to the Chicago Blackhawks in overtime. Obviously, in overtime. But they led this game 2-1 and led this game 2-1 in the third period. And they had 2 shots on goal in the third period. 2 against Chicago, who's not any good. They just stopped playing in the third period. Like, they weren't terrible defensively, but also go look at who's on Chicago's team. A lot of teams could play not terrible against Chicago defensively, but they just kind of stopped playing. They give up the game-tying goal. They go to overtime. They give up the winning goal. Fairly pathetic performance against a bad team. And now the Golden Knights have lost 5 games in a row, and it's the first time they've lost 5 games in a row since the 2021-2022 season. If you're keeping up to date on it, that's the only time the Golden Knights have ever missed the playoffs, right? So the only time, or the last time they did this, is the last time that they missed the postseason. So what happens here for the Golden Knights? There are a lot of injuries. Valid excuse, I think. There are a lot of injuries. It's a reason why this team recently has looked so bad. Jack Eichel is back, and they've still lost 2 in a row. But the injuries, I think, have caused them to play extremely poorly second half of December into January. And they're still in a playoff spot. They still lead the Pacific Division, actually. So there are positives and there are excuses that you can look at that I think are valid, right? But this team has won 17 of 40 games. And right now, this is a bad team. And they just did something they haven't done in years, in a bad way, by losing 5 in a row. And I think the question right now is what happens with Bruce Cassidy. Does Bruce Cassidy get fired midseason? He is the longest tenured coach that this organization has ever had. I know it's not a long history, but it's been a surprise when Gerard Gallant got fired. It was a surprise when Pete DeBoer got fired. This time, it actually wouldn't be a surprise, I guess, because of what they've done recently. And McCrimmon and McPhee, they fired those coaches really at the first sign of underperformance, right? Gallant's was in season. They kind of struggled. I think, if I remember correctly, they had fallen like 1 point out of a playoff spot, or maybe were 1 point in the playoffs or whatever it was. But it was like, oh, we're not going to win the Stanley Cup, so get the hell out of here. And then with DeBoer, it was the only year they missed the playoffs where they had a ton of injuries. Kelly McCrimmon gave a postseason press conference where he went through all of the injuries they had, blamed the whole season on injuries, and then fired the coach. So what they've done as a team, what they've done win-loss wise, based on the history of this front office, doesn't mean he's safe, right? It means, oh yeah, they could absolutely fire it. I think the question I have, and there's 2 parts, I think, when it comes to firing a coach, especially in the situation the Golden Knights are in. One, is he the problem? And I don't think Bruce Cassidy is the problem. I don't think anywhere close to the problem for the Golden Knights. The second question, though, is he the answer? Is he the solution to this? And I don't know, because there might not be a solution to it. They might just simply be too injured and have a bad roster, and it just doesn't matter who the coach is. But is he the solution? And I think that would be the valid one to ask when we're talking about, does Bruce Cassidy get fired, right? Does Bruce Cassidy give them the best chance to win the Stanley Cup? I don't even know if that's a fair thing to question right now with this team, but does he give them the best chance to win the Stanley Cup, or just win playoff rounds if you want to take that step back in expectations? I don't know. Who else is out there? Like, are they going to hire John Tortorella off TV? Like, who else is out there that would be better than Bruce Cassidy is a good way to look at it, middle of the season, especially when he's not the problem. So I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to fire him, but I wouldn't be surprised at this point. And I don't know. I feel like it would be a mistake, but I also don't feel like it's oh my God, how could the front office possibly do that? But what I do believe when we talk about what's the problem here, I think we're looking at roster construction. I think that's the issue at the end of the day. And there's a few different parts of this, right? You go back and just look at recent roster construction. The Golden Knights get eliminated from the playoffs by failing to score, right? They lose that series to Edmonton. It's just they don't score goals. And Kelly McCrimmon in the offseason adds Mitch Marner, a player who I have now been told 1,000 times doesn't score. And he's not here to score. Not here to score. Right? So fail to score. Big offseason addition is a guy who also doesn't score goals. Okay, makes sense. Another issue on this team is the goaltending. The Golden Knights have Adin Hill. He's just started his new contract. That's the starter, right? But did they have a legitimate backup? Depends on what you think of Akira Schmid. But I think the answer to that is no. They didn't have this legitimate number 2 goalie. And the reason that that's an issue is Adin Hill's career has told us he's not going to be healthy. Last year was the first time that he's had this sort of full, healthy season. That doesn't mean he's going to do it again. And as a GM, I think it would have been smart to say, okay, we need to get something else at the goaltender position. He did. Eventually, it was Carter Hart. And maybe that was the plan all along, was as soon as he was quitted, they were like, oh, we're going to sign that guy, right? But Carter Hart didn't play hockey for a year and a half and then came back and has sucked. And it's not like his career before the sexual assault allegations. It's not like he was this great goalie. Carter Hart, his career numbers are basically an average goalie. And then he doesn't play for a year and a half, comes back, and surprise, surprise, he's not good. That's a terrible plan. That's an awful plan for trying to figure out your goaltending depth when you have a guy who gets hurt all the time. So I think both of those are sort of problematic roster constructions. And then this one I heard Ken from Senbin point out. The Golden Knights have injuries. And specifically, you look at the defensive group for the Golden Knights right now. Braden McNabb and Shea Theodore out, that's your top pair. And that's not good. You're going to struggle there. But how many NHL replacement level defensemen are they using right now? Or better, obviously, right? Like Hanifin, okay. White Cloud, Hutton, and then what's the rest? Is Korzak good? They don't have depth to withstand injuries. That, I think, is the big issue here, is that they've run into these injuries and there's no depth to help it out. And so you look defensively and tie this to the Marner decision. What did the Golden Knights do this offseason defensively? Pietrangelo got LTIR retired and Nick Hague's gone. What'd they bring in? Nothing. They spent all the money. They spent the offseason. It was Mitch Marner. It was the Mitch Marner offseason. And so they had problems scoring goals. And in the offseason, they bring in a guy who doesn't score goals and get worse defensively. That's bad. That's bad roster construction. And now we're seeing that. Can they turn this around if they get healthy? Adin Hill comes back and he posts a .907 save percentage and he's plus 12 in goals saved above average over the final 20 games of the season. And the offense comes alive because they get healthy and they finally figure out what lines work together. And McNabb and Theodore come back and William Karlsson. And the defensive group is actually good. Could they figure this all out? Maybe. And in the Pacific Division, it's a bad division. It's a terrible division. It's not going to take a lot to sort of figure it out and win the Pacific part of the playoffs. But that feels like 95% of things have to go right. You have to get the injured guys back. They have to be good. You have to not lose other guys to injuries, right? Just on the injury front, that feels like, oh, that's not going to happen. Guys are going to be hurt or playing hurt that don't play up to their standard. And you're going to have to figure out which lines are the best. And you're going to have to get good production from your defensemen, right? Theodore and McNabb have to stay healthy and stay good. Hanifin's probably got to be better than he has been. And it just feels like they need everything to go their way because the roster simply isn't good enough to withstand injuries or downturn in performance. It's not good. I don't think they need to fire Bruce Cassidy. I think this team will be better than this, but I feel like I've been saying that for a month and a half now. Yeah, I think they're better than what they look like. And maybe they're not. Maybe they're just bad. Also in hockey, we got the Olympic rosters. The end of last week, the United States is going to have 2 Golden Knights, Jack Eichel and Noah Hanifin. Canada will have 3, Mark Stone, Mitch Marner, and Shea Theodore. No Adin Hill. He's been out with an injury. We don't really have a great timeline on when he's coming back because he's a Golden Knight. But no Adin Hill, largely because of that injury. William Karlsson was not named to the Swedish roster. which is interesting because if we're trying to figure out if William Karlsson's going to come back, the Golden Knights play February 5th, and then they have the Olympic break, and then they come back February 25th. So in theory, if Sweden said Karlsson's not ready, then maybe we should assume that Karlsson won't be back by February 5th, which means he's out till February 25th. But I guess there is a possibility that he could be back early February, and Sweden was like, we can't name the guy to the roster that we don't know if he can come back, and we're just sort of fingers crossed that he does. Maybe that's the case, but it would seem like Karlsson is going to be out the entire month of January at least because of Sweden not putting him on the roster. I'll say this, I'm excited about the Olympics. I always love the Olympics, World Cup, anything like that, any sporting event like that. So I am excited, very much so, about the Olympics. And hopefully we beat Canada. It'll be very nice. Jack Eichel, go score some goals. Noah Hannafin, do something good. It'll be fun. Also, in the NFL, God, this would be terrible. Phillip Rivers could be an NFL head coach, or maybe I should throw the word candidate in there based on how it was reported. Ian Rappaport Sunday morning said several sources say Phillip Rivers could end up as a head coach candidate this cycle. And the current belief is that Phillip Rivers gets at least one opportunity to interview, possibly more. The two teams that he played for, the Chargers and the Colts, don't have head coach openings. So he's probably not going there. Be a safe bet. But the Raiders firing Pete Carroll, that does seem likely. And Mark Davis wanting to hire a head coach simply because he knows it will create headlines, that sounds like Mark Davis. He wants his team in the headlines. He wants people to talk about the Raiders. Firing Phillip Rivers would do that a lot more than hiring Joe Brady. It's exactly what Mark Davis likes to do. So that can't happen. You cannot do that. You cannot draft Fernando Mendoza and say, all right, Phillip Rivers is going to lead our offense, lead our team to the promised land. Also, if you watched any of the Colts-Texans game on Sunday, what the hell were the Colts doing with Phillip Rivers playing quarterback ahead of Riley Leonard? Phillip Rivers sucked because he was in his mid-40s. Riley Leonard threw like a 60-something yard touchdown and ran for a touchdown. Two things that we know Phillip Rivers could do. What were they thinking? Like, what on earth was that? Riley Leonard was clearly a better option than Phillip Rivers. Like, that's an insane choice that the Colts made. Absolutely insane. I don't know, was Steichen the one that was primarily behind that? I don't know who it was, but whoever it was, what were you thinking? Like, should have played Riley Leonard the entire time. Also, in the NFL, couple of fun things. One, the Denver Broncos got the 1 seed in the AFC. I don't think they're that good, but they got the 1 seed. It's a weird year in the NFL. The Chargers are in the playoffs. Chiefs are not. And this is the question I have. Let's say hypothetically, things go well for the Raiders in their rebuild, right? They draft a quarterback at 1 who's good. They hire a head coach who's good. They make other good draft picks. I know, they haven't done that in a while, but they make other good draft picks and they make other good free agent signings. And the Raiders are a legitimate, like, playoff team and Super Bowl contender in 2028, right? Which of those 3 divisional opponents do you think are going to be the biggest hurdle in 2028? All 3 could have the same coach-quarterback combo by then. It could be Mahomes, Reed, Nix and Peyton, and Herbert and Harbaugh. All 3 could have the same exact combo, right? Obviously, Mahomes and Andy Reid are the dynasty that fell off this year, and I don't think anybody's expecting them to not come back to the conversation in the very, very near future, right? Nix and Peyton are the best right now, and then you have Herbert and Harbaugh. I actually think Herbert and Harbaugh might be the one that's the toughest to beat at that point. I think both are very good at what they do, but that is the tough part here for the Raiders is most likely they're not going to be able to sort of cheaply have success that makes their rebuild look good, right? If you were in, like, let's say the NFC South and picking first overall, Fernando Mendoza comes in and you hire a coach. And if Mendoza comes in and he's the 13th or 14th best quarterback in the NFL, and whoever you hire as your head coach is the 13th or 14th best head coach in the NFL, you might win the division next year in the NFC South, right? It's bad enough there. But in the AFC West, 13th or 14th, you're last. Like, I mean, the Chiefs were bad this year, but like, if you're not top 10, and Jesus, if you're not top 5, you're not winning the division, right? So that's, I think, the hard part is the Raiders, they have to get like everything right in the rebuild because of how good the division is and probably will be 3 years from now, right? Most likely 3 years from now, one of those teams are going to fall off, right? One of those teams will be like a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and one will just be sort of a playoff level or fringe playoff level team, right? They think that's like the most likely outcome. It's very unlikely that all three are kind of bad. It's also very unlikely all three are Super Bowl contenders. But the reality is that you're going to have to beat out a team that can win 12 or 13 games in a year to win the division. So you're going to have to get things right. The other funny part of the final weekend of the NFL, the NFC South, awesome. I mean, that's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So because the Buccaneers beat the Panthers on Saturday to force a tie at 8-9, the NFC South came down to a tiebreaker. And that tiebreaker was decided by the winner of Falcons and Saints on Sunday. Falcons playing on behalf of the Panthers' playoff chances, Saints playing on behalf of the Bucs' playoff chances. So you had a game where the Falcons and Saints played, and the playoff spot, the NFC South champion, was decided by that game, but neither the Falcons nor the Saints could actually win it. Incredible work. And by the way, the teams that could win it were their other division rivals. Phenomenal work, and I wish we got that every year. Atlanta won, and the Panthers were in the playoffs, despite, I think it was a minus 60-point differential this year, which is also hilarious. And of course, they're obviously going to win a playoff game, right? What do they get, the Rams? They're obviously beating the Rams in the first round because that's what happens when crappy teams make the NFL playoffs. That is it for Bischoff's Briefs. Coming up next, we're going to get into UNLV. Runnin Rebels got a win over a horrendous Air Force team, and UNLV might have its future quarterback. Before we get into UNLV, I do have a Patreon up. Somehow, a few of you have found it already, despite me not publicizing it anywhere. I'm still not going to publicize it yet because it's not ready. It's going to be ready fairly soon, but I appreciate those of you that have already found it and signed up for my Patreon. If you want to, go for it if you find it. But we're going to have that up soon. I got to figure out exactly how all we're going to work that and figure it out. But I appreciate the few of you that found it without me ever saying anything about it. Now, UNLV beat Air Force 67-39 on Saturday. They're now 2-0 in Mountain West play. They have played the two worst teams in Mountain West play. But 39 points. Air Force scored 39 points. The last time UNLV did that to a Division I team was 2010. Held a team under 40. 39 is insane, right? Like, I love to give you the points per possession, and that was also insane. It was 0.619, right? But I like to do that because I think that's a better number. 1 is about average, and that gives you a pretty easy way to determine how good or bad the defense or offense was. But you don't need that. All you need to hear is 39 bleeping points in that game. That is so bad. Air Force started the game on a 3-minute and 17-second scoring drought, and then they started the second half on a 6-minute and 10-second scoring drought. They were worse somehow. UNLV was like, they deserve credit defensively. They held them 39 points. And like, for example, to use the points per possession, San Diego State gave up 0.9 and Wyoming gave up 0.8. UNLV held them to 0.6 points per possession. That's very good. That's way better than any of these other teams have done this year. So UNLV, they did defend very well. The backdoor cuts and the motion that Air Force runs, I don't think they got beat on a backdoor cut until like the second half when they were up by like 15, 20 points. So they did very, very well against Air Force's offense. But oh my God, that was like the worst offensive game I think I've seen in person from a college basketball team. I'm trying to think, like, even a lot of the non-Division I opponents the UNLV has played, they've been better than that. Like, that was pathetic from Air Force. Couple things. One, UNLV was out 2 players because of the flu. Al Green and Nas Cunningham did not play due to the flu. UNLV plays again on Tuesday in Wyoming. Josh Pastner after the game said he You can't really know if they're going to be available, but he said he sort of expects that they'll be over the flu by then. So they went into this game with some flu question marks. Like Howie Fleming, for example, is supposed to talk to the media on Friday, but when we got there, like, Howie Fleming's not going to talk because the flu's going around. But Howie Fleming did play in the game. So probably going to have a full roster, or, well, not full because 2 guys are out for the whole season, but probably going to have close to a full roster for their game Tuesday in Wyoming. Also, I enjoyed after this game, Josh Pastner said that he got told by the eye doctor that he needs glasses now, and that he takes pride in not having to have glasses. I don't know what he's trying to say about people that wear glasses. Let's relax over there, Josh Pastner. We are people too. He doesn't want them, but he needs glasses now. So I'm waiting to see Josh Pastner reveal some glasses on the sideline so they can actually complain about calls. He doesn't complain too much about calls this year. I don't know if that's how he was always, but he doesn't really yell at the refs too much. But he needs glasses now. Fun thing to watch. Also wanted to point out here, Air Force has got to fire Joe Scott, their head coach. Like, these numbers are ridiculous. He's in his 6th season at Air Force. It's his 2nd stint, but his 6th season at Air Force under this stint. They've had 1 season where they were top 200 in KenPom. 1. Best record, Mountain West record in a single season under Joe Scott. 5-13. They are 15-81 in Mountain West games in these 5+ seasons. And their last 50 Mountain West games, when you include Mountain West tournaments, their last 50, they're 3-47. 3-47? I mean, San Jose State exists, and you're 3-47? Like, that's unbelievable, right? And the other funny part, I know it's football driven, but this is the other athletic program that got all the money from the Mountain West with UNLV to hold the conference together. This was the one the Mountain West was like, we got to have that one. They're 3-47 in the last 50 basketball games. Like, what are we talking about here? They're terrible. Like, Joe Scott, I know it's Air Force. Like, I know the expectations for Air Force basketball are low, but they should be higher than 3-47. That's absurd. One other funny thing before we get to some UNLV football, and this actually is a good segue here. UNLV has a promotional video that plays before games for the Rebel Up campaign, where they want you to give money so they can pay the players, right? And they have some athletes, but they also have basically all the coaches talking in this commercial about how important it is to give money to UNLV, right? And the funniest thing is that when Dan Mullen is talking, Dan Mullen specifically says, like, you need to help us, quote, attract and retain top talent. That's the sentence he says. And as he says that, there's a highlight of Anthony Calandria scoring a touchdown. I think you might want to remove that one, because not only is he gone, but he was the top talent they were unable to retain, specifically after they thought they were going to retain him because he came out and said he wasn't transferring. So they need to update their video there. Now, in football, UNLV, probably bigger news than them winning a basketball game. They might have their next quarterback. So Jackson Arnold is in the transfer portal. He was a quarterback at Auburn last year. I hesitate to say the starting quarterback. He was at one point, but he got benched. He was a quarterback at Auburn last year. He's in the portal. Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports reported that UNLV is, quote, an early team to watch for Jackson Arnold. I think the phrasing there is interesting. I'll get to that in just a second. But Jackson Arnold started out at Oklahoma, was there for 2 years, transferred, played last year at Auburn, again got benched. He got benched at Oklahoma as well. He was a top 10 recruit coming out of high school, but when you have a player, and we're about 3 or 4 years removed from their high school years, and the best way to describe them positively is to say, well, he was a 5-star recruit, well, he was a top 10 recruit, that means he sucked. That means he's been bad because there's nothing else to point to, right? You can't point to it and say, oh, he was a second-team All-SEC or something like that. Oh, he threw for 3,000 yards. You can't say that, right? He's bad. He's been bad, and the only positive thing we have to say is what his recruiting ranking was 3 years ago. Same is true for former first-round picks. If your favorite NFL team signs some guy and they're like, oh, he's a former first-round pick in 2021, it probably means he's sucked since then, because if there was anything else noteworthy to say, that's what you would say about it. He's a Pro Bowler, or he had 1,000 receiving yards, or whatever it was. That's always a fun way to judge. Oh, his career has been not good. Now, wasn't good at Oklahoma, wasn't good at Auburn. He's not going to be playing at Oklahoma or Auburn if he comes down to UNLV. He's going to be playing in the Mountain West, and a worse version of the Mountain West at that. Interesting, there is some running ability with Jackson Arnold. I don't know if he'll match what Calandria was able to do this year. I'd be surprised, I think. But there is some running ability there with Jackson Arnold that I'm sure Dan Mullen would be able to figure out and use pretty well. I've said this before. I have quite a bit of confidence in Dan Mullen getting good quarterback play, right? And at this level, you're dropping down to a worse Mountain West. I don't think using what he did at Oklahoma and Auburn is a great comparison, right? Obviously, it's going to be easier. So how good can he actually be at this level? We'll see if he comes. Because again, I think the wording of the report is very interesting. Again, I'll read it to you. Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports, who first reported this on Arnold and UNLV, the way he phrased it was UNLV is an early team to watch. And the reason I find that fascinating is because the portal just opened a couple of days ago. Who's going to be your quarterback next year? Teams probably have certain quarterbacks that they want. And what happens when they miss because they go somewhere else? I just saw, I think, Brendan Swordsby, who's like the #1 portal quarterback, is actually going to Texas Tech. He just took a visit to LSU, right? If LSU wanted him, but they didn't get him, they got to go down to step number 2, or option number 2, I should say. And eventually you get down to enough of these options, and somebody's taken Jackson Arnold. Maybe it's not a power conference team, or maybe it's a lower tier ACC school, whatever it is. But I do think that phrase early team is interesting, because what happens if an ACC school or a Big 12 school has more money than UNLV and a starting spot? That might be where Jackson Arnold goes if we're viewing this as an early team in on Jackson Arnold. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there if they actually do land Jackson Arnold, though. Not a great career so far. You don't like the idea of getting benched quarterbacks and all of that, but you're going to the Mountain West. Things could probably be just fine, especially with Dan Mullen here. Also, big news for UNLV. Jaden Thomas is coming back. We kind of already knew that, but he is not entering the transfer portal like Anthony Calandria. And his announcement came on the same day that the transfer portal opened. So you can probably take it for real, not like when guys say it before Christmas. But here's what I find interesting, Jaden Thomas and where he's going to stack up history for UNLV. He would need a monster season to become the all-time leading rusher in UNLV history. It's possible. It's 1,546 yards. So it's possible. You know, you get to a conference championship game and a bowl game, you play in 14 games, you just need to average a little over 100 yards, right? And you're in good shape. But he only had 1,036 this last season, so he'd need 500 more to get there. Seems unlikely. However, the touchdowns is possible because he needs 10 touchdowns to pass Lexington Thomas as the all-time leader in rushing touchdowns. His career so far, 12 as a freshman, 7 his second year, and 12 this past season. So he's gone over 10 in 2 of his 3 seasons. So that one does seem very doable for Jaden Thomas. So that's possible. I am curious, though, on the role, because, like, is it going to be exactly the same as last year? Because what we saw, like, he was the top running back on the team, right? He had 148 carries, though. That was the most on the team. Quarterback runs a lot for Dan Mullen, right? Calandria had 127 carries. About 50% of those were designed runs. So a lot of some sacks and scrambles in there as well. But if you take out all the quarterback rushes, just forget about quarterback runs, just focus on running back and wide receiver runs, he had 42% of all of those carries. So even as the leading rusher, he was not getting over 50% of the carries for just the running backs and wide receivers. And that seems like the best way to use him. This doesn't seem like a running back that you want to give 25 carries to in a game. It feels like you're better off if he gets 15 and you have another guy who gets 8, another guy who gets 2 or 3, right? That probably seems the best way to use Jaden Thomas. If he got all 25 carries in a game and he was healthy for the whole year, he might get to 1,500, 1,600 yards and break that record. But I don't think that's the best way to actually use him. Probably not. Now, last thing to end the show on, the college football playoff. Oh, Ole Miss is in the semifinal. Trinidad Chambliss, he's the best quarterback in college football, right? He might be. He was incredible against Georgia. He threw for 362 and made a handful of awesome throws in the fourth quarter to win that game. I will say this, watching Trinidad Chambliss this year, I thought he was a clear case of like, okay, a good college quarterback who's being elevated by really good coaching, right? Ole Miss, if you watch Ole Miss, they love to do a couple of things that are like really simple that you would think any quarterback could do, right? One of them is if a cornerback is playing 10 yards off of a wide receiver, they will automatically run a 7-yard curl, throw the 7-yard curl, right? And as long as it's an accurate pass, it's a free 7 yards. And free 7 yards, it's 2nd and 3. Or you break one tackle and it's 30 yards or more, right? They love to do that. It works really good against teams that aren't as talented because the Ole Miss wide receiver just runs around the corner. It's a huge play, right? That's not really this great play from the quarterback. That's just maybe a good pre-snap read or something like that, and then just an easy throw. They also love to get the tight end in the flat after some run action that pulls the linebacker the other way. Very easy throw for the quarterback. But specifically in that game against Georgia, Trinidad Chambliss made some incredible plays, some incredible off-script plays too, right? I mean, he was scrambling on quite a few plays for his life. He was throwing on the run incredibly well and made some deep throws that were on the money. And probably his best throw of the game was the 2-point conversion where he throws the wide receiver open in the back of the end zone. One of the biggest things he's had all season is his pocket presence. He does know when to run, when to scramble, and does a very good job while scrambling of keeping his eyes downfield, right? So, like, he does have some really good traits in here. I don't know what it means for Trinidad Chambliss in the future. He's trying to go into the transfer portal. He could very easily end up at LSU. He's got to get a waiver for another year. He doesn't have any eligibility left, but he's trying to get a waiver for an extra year. There's a chance he stays at Ole Miss because Ole Miss is helping him get that waiver. There's a chance he just goes to LSU and follows Lane Kiffin. There's a chance he doesn't get the waiver and he goes to the NFL. And I don't think anybody's using a first-round pick on Trinidad Chambliss. But he does seem like the quarterback with the skills or the physical traits and some of the performances that makes the big rise up in somebody's draft stock that leads to him getting drafted earlier, like it happened with Jackson Dart last year. So if he's in the NFL draft, very interested in that. And I'll say this. At the college level, not necessarily the pro level, but at the college level, I don't think there was great quarterback play this year. I don't think Fernando Mendoza as a college quarterback was anything special. And you can just look at his numbers. Not even close to what previous Heisman winners have been. Doesn't mean he's going to be bad as a pro quarterback. It doesn't translate exactly, right? But I don't think at the college level there was a big gap between Fernando Mendoza and Trinidad Chambliss, or Julian Sayin, or Dante Moore. I think all of those guys had pretty equally good but not spectacular seasons. So if Trinidad Chambliss comes out in the draft, I'll yell at you about how he's going to be great. I'll do it. It'll be a lot of fun. But this has been Bischoff's Briefs. No, it hasn't. This has been Technically Correct. I've done that a couple of times now. This has been Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you tomorrow.